Before Harry was introduced to the magical world, the only life that he knew was his life with the Dursleys. I did a poll to see if you guys wanted 3 separate videos for the family or 1 long video, and the long video won by a landslide. So here we go. I'm going to explain the life of all 3 of the Dursleys, which includes some information that Rowling released after the series ended. So let's get started. So let's start with Petunia. Petunia Evans was a muggle and the older sister of Lily, who was magically gifted. Before Lily knew she was magic, Petunia and Lily were close. But once Lily started showing off her special skills, like making flower petals move, Petunia was envious, but she covered this up with disapproval. When Severus Snape approached them one day at the park, Petunia laughed in his face when he said that he was a wizard and that Lily was a witch. When Snape called her a muggle, though she didn't know what it meant, she sensed his tone. She grabbed Lily and the two left. Lily later became friends with Snape, and he told her all about the magical world. Petunia told her little sister that Snape was lying. Petunia, however, actually did believe him, and desperately wanted to go to Hogwarts, so much so that she wrote to Albus Dumbledore, the headmaster of the school, and she begged him to take her too. Dumbledore kindly replied saying he was sorry, but he couldn't take her. One day, Petunia was hiding behind a bush, spying on Lily and Snape, as he told her all about the wizarding world, going into great detail, even talking about Azkaban and the Dementors that guard the prison. While she was listening, she lost her footing and revealed herself. Petunia, not knowing what to do, insulted Snape. He got mad and made a branch from a tree above to fall on her. She got up and ran away crying, as Lily went after her to comfort her older sister. When it was time for Lily to go to Hogwarts, Petunia saw her sister off to platform 9 3/4. Before she got on the train, Lily said that she would talk to Dumbledore and persuade him to accept her too. Petunia defensively replied, saying that she didn't want to go, and that she didn't want to be a freak like Lily. Lily started to cry when Petunia went on, saying, "That's where you're going. A special school for freaks. You and that Snape boy. Weirdos. That's what you two are. It's good you're being separated from the normal people. It's for our safety." Lily shot back, bringing up the letter that Petunia had written to Dumbledore, and she got furious that she and Snape had gone into her room and invaded her privacy. She gave her sister one last disgusted look before she spat out, "Freak," one last time. Lily boarded the train to Hogwarts, and the sisters' relationship was never the same after that. Petunia forever resented her little sister and felt as though Lily was the favorite, taking all of the love and attention from their parents.
My perfect sister being who she was. Oh, my mother and father were so proud. We have a witch in the family. I was the only one to see her for what she was. A freak.
Petunia left the family's town of Cokeworth forever and pursued a typing course in London. This led to an office job at Grunnings, where she met an extremely unmagical, opinionated, and materialistic Vernon Dursley. He was a big, beefy man with hardly any neck and a large mustache. Vernon was born into the Muggle Dursley family, and as a boy, he attended Smelting's Academy. He was the younger brother of Marjorie, who was nicknamed Marge, who made a living breeding bulldogs. Vernon worked at Grunnings, a drill-making company, as a junior executive. To Petunia, he was perfect. He was a model of manliness and returned her affection. But most of all, he was deliciously normal. The two started dating, and after a few dull dates where Vernon mainly talked about himself and his predictable ideas on the world, Petunia was dreaming of the moment when he would place a ring on her finger. When Vernon finally did propose, Petunia accepted at once. As happy as she was, she got very nervous about her new fiancé learning of her sister, who was now in her final year at Hogwarts. Vernon was quick to despise even people who wore brown shoes with black suits, so what he would think of a witch, Petunia could hardly bear to think. Petunia cried as she finally told Vernon the truth during one of their dull dates. Vernon told her that he would never hold it against her that she had a freak for a sister, and Petunia threw herself upon him in such a violent gratitude that he dropped his sausage. Lily had met a boy named James Potter while at Hogwarts, and the two sisters, along with their significant others, met up, which did not go well. James was amused by Vernon and made the mistake of showing it off. Vernon tried to patronize James, asking what kind of car he drove, and James described his racing broom. Vernon then assumed that wizards had to live on an unemployment benefit, but James explained Gringotts and the fortune that his parents had saved there in solid gold. Vernon, thinking that he was being made fun of, got angry. The evening ended with Vernon and Petunia storming out of the restaurant while Lily burst into tears. James, a little ashamed with himself, promised to make things up with Vernon. However, this never happened. Petunia, who was tired of being overshadowed by her sister, decided not to make Lily a bridesmaid at her wedding. This deeply hurt Lily, who wanted to be there for her sister. Lily and James still went to the wedding, and at the reception, Vernon refused to speak to James. He then proceeded to call James an amateur magician within his earshot. After Petunia and Vernon were married, Petunia began to become more and more like her husband. They moved into their new house at number 4 Privet Drive. She gave up her career and stayed at home. She spent most of her time using her unusually long neck to peer over the fence and spy on the neighbors. Petunia was relieved to finally have a life where she was completely free of magic. Petunia and Vernon decided not to attend Lily and James's wedding, which again made Lily extremely hurt. Petunia eventually got pregnant, which was very exciting for her and Vernon. Their son Dudley was born on June 23, 1980. In their opinion, there was no finer boy anywhere. He was very spoiled and was a brat. He was constantly throwing temper tantrums, even at just a few months old. The final interaction Petunia had with her sister was a card from Lily and James announcing their son Harry's birth, and after one contemptuous look, Petunia threw it in the trash. Petunia started to become even more determined of suppressing all talk about her sister. This was because she felt guilty about the way she had cut Lily out of her life, who she knew in her heart had always loved her. But these feelings were buried deep inside of her, and she never told Vernon or anyone else about them. Buried even deeper was her long ago hope that she too would show signs of magic and be able to go to Hogwarts. This eventually got to the point where Petunia pretended that she didn't even have a sister. One day, Mr. Dursley went to work on what he thought was an ordinary day until strange things started occurring. First, he saw a cat reading a map, and when he did a double take, the map suddenly disappeared. This was of course Professor McGonagall. He then started seeing strangely dressed people in cloaks. Later in the day, he walked past some of them and heard them say, "Harry Potter." He immediately started dialing Petunia, but then thought better of it, thinking he shouldn't make her worry. He wasn't even sure his nephew was named Harry. That night, he was watching the news, and he learned that owls were acting very strangely, baffling birdwatchers everywhere. They also said that there was a downpour of shooting stars. All of this made Vernon ask Petunia about her sister and her baby, and when she confirmed his name was Harry, Vernon's heart sank. All of these weird things were of course people celebrating Petunia and Vernon's nephew defeating Voldemort when he tried to kill the boy who lived. When shortly after that, Petunia's nephew arrived on the doorstep, they were in for quite a shock. Harry came with a letter from Dumbledore explaining to Petunia how her sister had been killed and that he had no other family. Many people asked Dumbledore why he chose the Dursleys out of all others because they were truly awful people who ended up treating Harry like dirt.
Leaving him with these people. I've watched them all day. They're the worst sort of muggles imaginable.
But Dumbledore had a very good reason for this. Dumbledore said that he knew Harry was going to suffer with them, and he knew he was condemning him to 10 dark and difficult years. But more importantly, Dumbledore knew that Voldemort's followers were angry and desperate, and that they might go after Harry for taking down their leader. He also knew that Voldemort would return, and knew he would not rest until he killed Harry. However, he did not know when this would happen. Because of these factors, he had to keep Harry safe. To do this, he turned to the one thing that Voldemort couldn't understand: love. It's what Lily used to save Harry. Because she sacrificed herself, it gave Harry a protection, which is why Voldemort was unable to kill Harry that night. To keep this protection alive, he sent Harry to the only known place where his mother's blood lived on, to her sister Petunia's house. As long as Harry could call the place where his mother's blood still existed his home, the protection that his mother gave him would live on, and number 4 Privet Drive was the only place where that was possible. Dumbledore explained all of this to Petunia in the letter, as well as saying how bravely Lily died. And Petunia knew that she had to take Harry in and raise him along with her own son. She did this grudgingly, however, and spent the rest of Harry's childhood punishing him and ordering him around. Vernon's dislike of Harry stemmed from Harry's close resemblance to his father. When Petunia and Vernon took Harry in, they said that they were putting an end to his magical heritage and powers. This was largely due to their own fears. Hearing of Lord Voldemort, the man that had killed Lily and James, and had tried to kill the very boy living in their own house, frightened them a great deal. Despite being raised alongside a witch, Petunia was almost as ignorant about magic as Vernon was, and the two thought that they could squash the magic out of Harry. They told him that his parents had died in a car crash. When Harry first arrived, Dudley took to prodding and pinching Harry for the first few weeks. Over the course of the next 10 years, the Dursleys filled the house with pictures of Dudley, but not a single picture of Harry. They made Harry sleep in the cupboard under the stairs, while Dudley had 2 entire rooms, one for sleeping and one for his toys that did not fit in his first bedroom. They made Harry do work around the house and occasionally make them breakfast.
Hurry up! Bring my coffee, boy!
The only thing that they gave Harry to wear was Dudley's hand-me-downs, which were way too big and baggy on him. About once a week, Vernon said that Harry needed a haircut, as it reminded him of James, whom he despised. One day, they cut Harry's hair so short that he was almost bald. The next day, they were shocked and angry to see that his hair had grown back. The Dursleys saw many odd things like this happen when Harry was around, and they often punished him for it. Another time, Petunia was forcing Harry to wear a jumper that was revolting, but as she was putting it on him, it got smaller and smaller until it was so small that it might have fit a glove puppet. Vernon and Petunia made sure that magic was never brought up in the house because they were scared that Harry might get dangerous ideas. Once, when Harry said that he had a dream about a flying motorbike, Vernon responded by sternly saying that motorbikes did not fly. One day, while Petunia, Dudley, and Harry went shopping, a man bowed to Harry. After Petunia asked Harry furiously if he knew who they were, she rushed them out of the shop without buying anything. Dudley was the master of finessing his parents. He often pretended to cry because he knew if he did, his mother would give him whatever he wanted. On Dudley's 5th birthday, Vernon's sister Marge came to Privet Drive for the party. While there, Marge hit a 4-year-old Harry in the shins with her walking stick to stop him from beating Dudley at musical chairs. Dudley and his friends were bullies, and Dudley was the leader because he was the biggest and stupidest of them all. They tormented Harry more than anyone else, using him as a punching bag. One day at school, they were chasing Harry when he ended up on the roof of the school, which he was severely punished for by Vernon and Petunia. One Christmas, Aunt Marge gave Dudley a computerized robot and gave Harry a dog biscuit. Another time that she visited, Harry accidentally stepped on the tail of her favorite dog, and it chased Harry out into the garden and up a tree. The Dursleys watched as they laughed hysterically at Harry. Marge refused to call him off until past midnight. On Harry's 10th birthday, the Dursleys gave him a coat hanger and a pair of Vernon's old socks. On Dudley's 11th birthday, he got the new computer he wanted, along with a second TV and a racing bike. Dudley, however, was angry at the number of presents that he had gotten.
36, but last year I had 37!
Petunia, sensing a temper tantrum, said that she would buy him 2 more presents when they went out. Dudley's friend Pierce came over and they went to the zoo. When they were in the reptile section, Dudley wanted the biggest snake to move. Dudley eventually got bored and walked away. When Harry made the snake wake up, Pierce called out to Dudley and ran over. He pushed Harry out of the way, and the two leaned on the glass. The glass then disappeared, and the snake escaped. Dudley and Pierce blew the incident out of proportion. The zoo director apologized over and over again, and made Petunia some tea. The boys said that the snake had nearly bitten off their leg and squeezed them to death, while all that really happened was that it walked past their heels. Mr. Dursley punished Harry for the incident and locked him in his cupboard with no meals. It turned into the longest punishment that they had ever given him. When the summer started, Dudley's friends came over every day, and they all played Dudley's favorite sport, Harry hunting. When Harry started getting letters from Hogwarts, Vernon and Petunia were in shock and got scared that the magic that they had sworn off for so many years would trickle back into their lives. They hid everything from Dudley, which made him very angry, as he wasn't used to being ignored or left out by his parents. The letter was addressed to the cupboard under the stairs, which terrified Vernon and Petunia. "Look at the address! How could they possibly know where he sleeps?" The two decided that ignoring and burning the letters would be their best move. That night, thinking that they were being watched, Vernon and Petunia decided to have Harry move into Dudley's second bedroom. Dudley was furious and left shocked after he had screamed, whacked his father with a stick, kicked his mother, and had thrown his tortoise through the greenhouse roof, but still didn't have his room back. The next letter came the next day, and the address made them know that Harry had been moved from the cupboard under the stairs to the smallest room in the house. Harry, Vernon, and Dudley all fought each other for the letter until Vernon won. That night, Vernon slept on the ground in front of the front door to make sure that Harry didn't get the letter. Harry woke up with his own plan, but stepped on Uncle Vernon's face. Vernon shouted at Harry for half an hour for this. Vernon spent the next few days ensuring that no letters could get into the house. Despite everything that he did, they still found very creative ways to get the letters inside. That Sunday, hundreds of letters shot out of the chimney, and Vernon made sure that Harry didn't get his hands on any of them. Vernon, furious, told everyone to pack. Vernon hit Dudley over the head for holding them up after trying to pack his TV and computer. They drove for hours, and even Petunia didn't ask the very angry Vernon where they were going. Vernon kept making sharp turns and would drive in the opposite direction to shake them off. He finally stopped at a hotel on the outskirts of a big city. The next day, when they were eating breakfast at the hotel, the owner came over and said that he had over 100 letters for H. Potter at the front desk. Vernon made them go on the road again. He stopped in the middle of a forest, got out, looked around, and shook his head as he got back in the car. He did the same thing at a plowed field and at the top of a multi-story car garage. This made Dudley ask his mother.
Daddy's gone mad, hasn't he?
Vernon then stopped at the coast and left for a long time. When he returned, he took them all to a shack on a rock in the middle of the water. A toothless old man lent them his rowing boat to get there. It was pouring rain and freezing on the boat. Vernon thought that no letter could reach them out here during the storm. In the middle of the night, Hagrid, a half-giant, came to the hut and broke the door down. Vernon pointed a rifle at Hagrid, who bent the rifle like it was nothing. He then told Harry everything that the Dursleys had spent the last 10 years hushing up. This included his magical ability, how his parents really died, and Hogwarts. Hagrid was furious with the Dursleys that they didn't tell Harry anything and made them cower in the corner. When Vernon got his courage back, he expressed his hatred for James and Lily. For all this about your parents, well, they were weirdos, no denying it. The world's better off without them in my opinion. He then insulted Dumbledore, which made Hagrid furious.
Never insult Albus Dumbledore in front of me.
Hagrid retaliated by making Dudley have a pig's tail. Vernon put Dudley and Aunt Petunia in the other room and cast one last terrified look at Hagrid and slammed the door on him and Harry. After getting his school supplies, Harry returned to the Dursleys for one more month before he went off to Hogwarts. Dudley was now scared of Harry and wouldn't be in the same room as him. Petunia and Vernon no longer asked Harry to do anything, nor did they shout at him. They just left him alone and hardly spoke to him. The day before Harry had to leave for Hogwarts, he asked his uncle if he could take him to King's Cross. He only agreed because they were going to London anyway to get Dudley's tail removed. When they got there the next morning, Vernon brought Harry and his trunk into the station, only to laugh at him and leave him there when there was no platform 9 3/4. He said with a nasty smile, "Have a good term." Harry then watched as the Dursleys drove off. That fall, Dudley started at Smeltings, the private school where his father went. Petunia had taken Dudley to get his uniform, and he wore it all around the house. This made Petunia cry and made Vernon say that it was the proudest moment of his life. When Harry returned to the Dursleys the following summer, they locked all of Harry's school supplies under the cupboard and didn't let him have access to any of it. Dudley was back from his school Smeltings for the summer. Petunia was building Dudley up with food because she didn't like the sound of the food he was getting at school, but Vernon assured her that he's getting enough based on the fact that he never went hungry there himself. The Dursleys didn't know that Harry wasn't allowed to use magic outside of school, and Dudley was even more terrified of him. When Dudley asked Harry to pass the bacon, he said, "You've forgotten the magic word," making Dudley cower, Petunia scream, and made Vernon get furious. Dudley later came up to Harry and told him that he knew it was his birthday, and asked him why he hadn't gotten any cards from his friends. "How come you haven't gotten any cards? Haven't you got friends at that freak school?" Harry then threatened to use magic, making Dudley stumble backward. That night, Vernon was working on the biggest sale of his career and was having a dinner party to secure the deal. Vernon threatened Harry that night, warning him not to make a sound during the party.
And you?
I'll be in my bedroom, making no noise and pretending that I don't exist.
While the Dursleys were entertaining, they heard thumping coming from upstairs, which was Dobby the house elf.
What the devil are you doing up here?
Dobby made the dessert that Petunia had worked on all day fall to the ground. The Dursleys, not knowing that Dobby was there, thought it was Harry who did this. Many owls then started to fly in for Harry from the ministry and from his friends. The buyer's wife was mortally afraid of birds, and the buyer asked them whether this was their idea of a sick joke as he and his wife stormed out. The letters that Harry had gotten made the Dursleys find out that Harry wasn't allowed to use magic outside of school. This changed everything. To punish him for that night, Vernon locked him in his room with bars on the window.
You're never going back to that school.
While the Dursleys were sleeping, however, Harry started to escape the house when Ron and his brothers busted him out of his room with their dad's flying car. Vernon just barely missed him, and Harry called out to him as he flew away, "See you next summer." For Christmas, the Dursleys sent Harry a toothpick and a note telling him to find out if he could stay at Hogwarts for the summer vacation too. The following summer, Ron called Harry on the Dursleys' landline, and he yelled into the phone, making Vernon hold it far away from his ear. They were furious with Harry for giving out their number to wizards. That summer, Vernon had gotten a new company car, and they all admired it very loudly so that their neighbors would notice it too. As a welcome home from school present for Dudley, he got a TV in the kitchen after complaining loudly about the long walk between the fridge and the television in the living room. Dudley spent most of his summer in front of this TV while stuffing his face. Later that summer, Vernon's sister Marge was visiting for a week. The Dursleys had told Marge that Harry went to a disciplinarian school, and they threatened Harry if he didn't stick to that story. Marge enjoyed picking on Harry, and unlike the Dursleys, who wanted him out of sight, Marge wanted him in sight at all times. When she began to insult Harry's parents, calling his mom a bad egg and his dad a drunk, Harry lost it. He made Marge swell up into a monstrous balloon. Harry left the room, and Vernon followed him, demanding that he put her back to normal. Harry then pointed his wand at Vernon and walked out with all of his stuff. 2 members from the ministry went to the Dursleys' house to put Marge back to normal and modified her memory so that she would have no recollection of the incident. When Harry came home the following summer, Vernon picked him up at King's Cross, where he was staring Mrs. Weasley down from afar. Harry told Uncle Vernon about Sirius Black, his godfather, who was a convicted murderer and who had escaped from prison. He told his uncle that he would be checking in to see if Harry was happy. This gave Vernon a look of horror on his face. The Dursleys, fearing Sirius, allowed Harry to have all of his school things in his bedroom, rather than in the cupboard like the last 2 years. When Dudley returned home from school, the nurse had told his parents that he was too fat and that they didn't make uniforms big enough for him to fit in. This made Petunia start a new diet for the entire family, following a regime that Smeltings made for them. This led to many tantrums and arguments. Dudley was not alone in hating the diet, as Uncle Vernon was against it as well, saying they were eating rabbit food. One morning, Vernon got very angry at Harry after the mailman laughed in his face while delivering a letter that's entire envelope was covered in stamps. It was from Mrs. Weasley asking if Harry could go to the Quidditch World Cup with them. When Uncle Vernon and Harry got in a fight about it, Harry said he was going to write to Sirius. This scared Vernon, and he agreed to let Harry go. Before the Weasleys came, Vernon put on his best suit to look impressive and intimidating to them. When they arrived, they came by chimney. However, the chimney was boarded up. The Weasleys ended up being stuck behind the boards. To get out, Mr. Weasley blasted the boards away, destroying the Dursleys' living room. The Dursleys were furious, but they were too scared to say anything because Mr. Weasley had his wand out. Mr. Weasley magically put the room back together to make it spotless. When Harry said bye to the Dursleys, and they didn't say anything at all, Mr. Weasley was in shock. Harry said goodbye to you. Didn't you hear him? You aren't going to see your nephew till next summer. Surely you're going to say goodbye. Vernon was furious that a wizard had tried to teach him consideration, but Mr. Weasley still had his wand out, so Vernon resentfully said, "Goodbye then." Before Fred and George left, they purposefully spilled their joke candy on the ground to test it, hoping that Dudley would eat it. Dudley did just that, desperate for sweets after he had been on his strict diet for weeks. Their joke candy made his tongue swell up to be a foot long. Vernon and Petunia were outraged and screamed when Mr. Weasley stepped forward to fix it. Vernon threw china figures very hard at Mr. Weasley, who ducked and dodged them. By the time they allowed Mr. Weasley to fix it, Dudley's tongue was 4 feet long. During the school year, Dudley took on a new sport, boxing. This made him get into much better shape, and he became the junior heavyweight inter-school boxing champion. Vernon told this to anyone that would listen. The following summer, when Dudley returned home from school, he lied to his parents every night, telling them that he was going to tea with a different member of his gang every evening. In reality, he and his gang were vandalizing the play park, smoking on street corners, and throwing stones at passing cars and children. All of the neighborhood children were terrified of Dudley, especially now that he had been trained to fight. One kid he went after was knocked out cold for 20 minutes by the time that Dudley was done with him. One night, Dudley and Harry were walking home together, and Harry was taunting him, calling him a pig, saying he was stupid, and making fun of the nickname his friends gave him, Big D. Dudley then started making fun of Harry, talking in your sleep, moaning, "Don't kill Cedric. Don't kill Cedric." Who's Cedric, your boyfriend? Harry then pulled out his wand, which frightened Dudley. Dudley then let out a shuddering gasp, as though he had been doused in icy cold water. The weather changed completely, and they were surrounded by total, impenetrable, silent darkness. Two Dementors went after them. Dudley wasn't able to see them because he was a muggle, and thinking that Harry was causing it, punched him in the head, making him fall to the ground and drop his wand. Dudley then ran for it, but one of the Dementors grabbed him. After Harry had gotten rid of the Dementor that went after him, he went to save Dudley. Dudley? Dudley! Right before the Dementor was going to give Dudley the Dementor's kiss, a fate worse than death, Harry sent his stag to get the Dementor, seconds before Dudley's life would have been changed forever. Harry carried Dudley home alongside their squib neighbor, Mrs. Fig. When Harry finally got Dudley home, he puked on the doormat. Petunia and Vernon thought that Dudley was mugged.
Who did this to you, boy?
Petunia and Vernon were furious with Harry, and got even more mad when owls started flying in with letters to Harry. Dudley explained to them what had happened in incomplete sentences, as he was still very shaken from the presence of the Dementors. Horrible. Cold. Really cold. All dark. Everything dark. And then I heard things inside my head. Dudley was incapable of telling his mother what he had heard in his head when she asked. When Harry told them that it was Dementors that did this, Vernon asked what they were, and to everyone's surprise, Petunia was the one that answered, saying that they were the guards of Azkaban. When Harry asked her how she knew that, she said, "I heard that awful boy telling her about them years ago." Harry thought she was referring to his parents, but Petunia was not thinking of James or her resentment toward her sister. She was remembering a time when she was close to Lily, when she wanted nothing more than to be magic just like her. Remembering when years ago, she was hiding behind a bush, eagerly listening to Snape tell Lily all about the wizarding world that she so desperately wanted to be a part of. This made Petunia horribly flustered. Harry was shocked that she had remembered this tiny detail of the wizarding world. But Petunia remembering this proves how much the wizarding world meant to her, and how badly she wished that she could be a part of it. Harry then told them that Voldemort, the man that had killed Lily and James, was back. Petunia looked horrified and whispered, "Back." She looked at Harry as she had never looked at him before, and for the first time in his life, Harry fully appreciated that his Aunt Petunia was his mother's sister.
You didn't just lose a mother that night in Godric's Hollow, you know. I lost a sister.
Realizing that Harry was endangering his family, Vernon kicked Harry out of the house. Just then, Petunia received a howler that said, "Remember my last, Petunia." Petunia put her face in her hands, and when Vernon asked her what was wrong several times, she finally answered, saying that Harry had to stay. The howler had been from Dumbledore, reminding her of the letter that he had left with Harry. She remembered the protection that she gave Harry, and she knew that she couldn't let the child of Lily, that she knew deep down always loved her, die when she could have stopped it. A few days later, the Dursleys went out after receiving a letter telling them that they'd been nominated for the Best Suburban Lawn Competition. They went to the prize giving, only to find out that there was no such thing. The Order of the Phoenix had sent them the letter to lure them away from the house so that they could take Harry. The Dursleys were even more furious to come home and find out that Harry was gone and that wizards had been in their house. They knew this because Remus Lupin had left them a letter explaining that they had taken Harry. Later on that year, Harry learned of the protection that Petunia provided him, and he now understood that it was absolutely necessary to live at number 4 Privet Drive for at least a few weeks a year. At the end of the school year, all of the Dursleys picked Harry up at King's Cross, and Lupin, Mad-Eye, Mr. Weasley, Tonks, and Hermione all went up to the Dursleys. They threatened them, saying that if Harry was at all mistreated, the Dursleys would have to deal with them. Vernon asked if they were threatening him, and Mad-Eye responded saying, "Yes, I am," as he lifted up his bowler hat to reveal his magical eye, making Vernon leap backwards. That summer, Harry had very little contact with the Dursleys and kept himself locked in his room most of the time. Later in the summer, Dumbledore arrived at the Dursleys' house to pick up Harry. Harry had forgotten to tell them that Dumbledore was coming, which made Vernon angry, Petunia shocked, and made Dudley scared as he always was around fully grown wizards. Vernon quickly realized that Dumbledore was not a man that he could bully. Dumbledore forced the Dursleys' hospitality on himself by inviting himself into the house, then into their living room, and forcing them to sit down with him. Dumbledore then had Harry call Kreacher the house elf, making all of the Dursleys scream, all clearly disgusted and horrified by him. When Harry went to pack up his things, Dumbledore and the Dursleys sat in silence for 10 minutes. Dumbledore was quite at ease, while the Dursleys were very tense. Before they left, Dumbledore called the Dursleys out for the way that they treated Harry, saying that he asked them to raise Harry as their own. "You did not do as I asked. You never treated Harry as a son. He has known nothing but neglect and often cruelty at your hands. Dumbledore then explained to them that the protection that Harry had while living there would go away when he turned 17 the next summer, and he asked that Harry stay there one last time a year from then. Harry and Dumbledore then left. Just as Dumbledore wanted, Harry returned to the Dursleys for the last time the following summer. One day, Harry found a cup of tea outside his bedroom, which he stepped on. He assumed that it was a booby trap that Dudley had set for him. Toward the end of July, Mr. Weasley and Kingsley Shacklebolt arrived at the house, telling the Dursleys that they were in danger and needed to leave the house for safety. Once Harry turned 17, the protection for not only him disappears, but the protection for the Dursleys as well. The family had packed all of their things and were getting ready to leave, but Uncle Vernon had gone back and forth on leaving and staying every 24 hours for the past week. Harry finally convinced him when he brought up the last time that they tried to outrun wizards and how well that went for them, forcing a flashback to the letters chasing them everywhere that they went. Order of the Phoenix members Hestia Jones and Daedalus Diggle arrived to take the Dursleys. As Uncle Vernon said goodbye to Harry, he reached out a hand, but at the last moment he was unable to face it, closed his fist, and awkwardly swung his arm backward and forward. Petunia did not make eye contact with Harry as she asked Dudley if he was ready, but Dudley merely stood there and stared at Harry and said, "I don't understand. Why isn't he coming with us?" When Hestia was appalled that they didn't know anything about what Harry had been through and what he was about to do, Harry said that the Dursleys just thought he was a waste of space. Dudley then responded saying,
"I don't think you're a waste of space.
You saved my life." Dudley was talking about the time that Harry saved his life from the Dementors. It then dawned on Harry that the cup of tea outside his bedroom was from Dudley and was not a booby trap, but rather a kind gesture. Petunia made a big fuss of how sweet Dudley was. Hestia pointed out that he hadn't done anything, and Harry said that those words for Dudley translated to, "I love you." As they were leaving, Dudley shook Harry's hand, and he said, "See you, Harry."
See you, Big D.
The Dursleys drove for 10 miles with Hestia and Diggle before disapparating to safety. They stayed in protective custody with them until the war was over. Later on in life, Dudley got married and had 2 children, making Vernon and Petunia grandparents. Dudley and Harry remained on Christmas card terms. Harry and Dudley occasionally got their kids together. During this time, Harry and Dudley would sit silently together, rarely talking, while their children interacted and played. Both Vernon and Petunia passed away, most likely of old age, sometime before 2020. After Petunia died, Harry found out that she had saved the blanket that he was wrapped in when he was brought to number 4 Privet Drive. In her will, she made sure it was passed on to Harry, perhaps as a last gesture after all of the hard things that she and her family had put Harry through, and possibly as one last tribute to her younger sister Lily. Thank you so much for watching, guys. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you hit that subscribe button to help grow the channel. You can follow me on social media, links are in the description, and look out for more great videos on the way.